Step back in time with me, to the year 1888. Imagine the foggy, gaslit streets of London's East End, specifically the impoverished and overcrowded district of Whitechapel. It's a place of shadows and secrets, where desperation hangs heavy in the air. This is the setting for one of history's most enduring and chilling unsolved mysteries, the reign of terror of Jack the Ripper. For 10 terrifying weeks, between August and November, this spectral figure stalked the dimly lit alleyways and grimy courtyards of Whitechapel. His victims were all women, living on the fringes of society, forced into poverty and perilous situations just to survive. But this wasn't just a series of murders. It was the nature of the attacks that spread a wave of panic, unlike any other across the city, and eventually, the world. The 5 women, now known as the Canonical Five, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eden, and Mary Jane Kelly were not just killed. They were brutally mutilated in a way that suggested the perpetrator had a chilling degree of anatomical or surgical knowledge. The precision and savagery of the wounds baffled investigators and horrified the public. Who could commit such acts? And why? The name Jack the Ripper itself adds another layer to the legend. It originated from a letter, famously known as the Dear Boss letter, sent to the Central News Agency. The author claimed responsibility for the murders and signed off with the now infamous moniker. Another correspondence, the From Hell letter, was even more gruesome. It was sent to George Lusk, the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and was accompanied by a small box containing half of a preserved human kidney, supposedly taken from one of the victims. Whether these letters were genuinely from the killer or cruel hoaxes designed to taunt the police and sensationalize the crimes is still debated today. But what isn't debatable is their effect. They cemented the name Jack the Ripper into the public consciousness, creating a phantom-like character who could be anyone, lurking just out of sight. The media of the day, a burgeoning force of penny dreadfuls and illustrated papers, seized upon the story, fanning the flames of fear and speculation. The police investigation was one of the largest in history at the time. Detectives from Scotland Yard flooded the streets of Whitechapel. They conducted thousands of interviews, followed up on countless leads, and detained hundreds of individuals for questioning. Yet, despite their exhaustive efforts, the killer remained elusive. It was as if he could melt back into the fog, leaving behind only his horrific work and a city gripped by fear. The final canonical murder, that of Mary Jane Kelly, was by far the most savage. It took place indoors, in her small room on Miller's Court, allowing the killer an unprecedented amount of time to carry out his gruesome work. After that night, November 9th, 1888, the brutal, signature killings stopped as abruptly as they had begun. Jack the Ripper simply vanished. And so it began the greatest whodunit in criminal history. The mystery of his identity has spawned over a century of speculation, and an entire industry of ripperologists dedicated to solving the case. The list of suspects is long and varied, reflecting the wild theories that have captured the public imagination for generations. One of the earliest and most prominent theories centered on medical professionals. The nature of the mutilations led many to believe the killer had to be a doctor, a surgeon, or at least someone with anatomical expertise. Suspects like Montague, John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher who was found drowned in the Thames shortly after the final murder, were considered. His own family suspected he was the Ripper. Then there were figures like Suerin Kalasowski, also known as George Chapman, a Polish immigrant who was a convicted poisoner. He had some surgical training, worked in Whitechapel during the murders, and was even a prime suspect for one of the lead investigators at the time, Inspector Frederick Abb. Another fascinating and controversial suspect is the artist Walter Sick. Proponents of this theory, most notably the crime novelist Patricia Cornwell, have spent millions trying to prove his guilt, suggesting that clues to the crimes are hidden within his dark, atmospheric paintings of London life. They even claim to have found DNA evidence linking him to the letters, though this remains highly disputed by many experts. The theories don't stop there. Some are even more sensational, reaching into the highest echelons of society. One popular but largely discredited theory points to a member of the royal family, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, in Avondale, Queen Victoria's grandson. The story goes that he was involved in a secret marriage, and the murders were part of a complex royal conspiracy to cover it up, carried out by the Queen's physician, Sir William Goole. While it makes for a great story, historical records show the prince wasn't even in London for most of the murders. We also have less famous but equally intriguing suspects, like Aaron Kosminski. He was a Polish-Jewish immigrant who worked as a hairdresser in Whitechapel and suffered from severe mental illness. He was a favorite suspect of Sir Robert Anderson, the Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard at the time, and was eventually institutionalized. In recent years, a shawl said to have been found near one of the crime scenes was tested for DNA, with results purportedly pointing to Kosminski. However, the authenticity of the shawl and the validity of the DNA testing are subjects of intense debate and skepticism within the historical and scientific communities. There are even theories suggesting the killer might not have been a Jack at all, but a Gil the Ripper. Could a woman, perhaps a midwife, move through the streets of Whitechapel unnoticed, her blood-stained clothes dismissed as a normal part of her profession? It's another compelling idea that adds to the endless possibilities. The fact is, we will likely never know for sure. The lack of forensic technology in 1888 means the case was built on eyewitness accounts, which were often contradictory, and police work that was easily hampered by the chaotic environment of Whitechapel. The evidence is simply too old, too contaminated, or too ambiguous, but perhaps that is why the story of Jack the Ripper continues to fascinate us. He's not just a historical criminal. He represents the darkness that can exist beneath the surface of a civilized society, the fear of the unknown, and the ultimate, unsolvable puzzle. He was a ghost in the machine of the Industrial Revolution, a product of the poverty and social neglect of his time. The legacy of Jack the Ripper is twofold. On one hand, is a terrifying tale of murder and mystery. On the other, his crimes had a profound and lasting impact. The intense media scrutiny brought the horrific living conditions of London's East End to the attention of the wider public, sparking social reform that eventually helped to improve the lives of the city's poorest residents. So, the next time you hear the name Jack the Ripper, remember the gaslit streets, the creeping fog, and the panic he caused. But also remember the real people involved, the victims, whose tragic lives were cut short, and the countless individuals who have dedicated themselves to trying to give them, and us, an answer. The mystery endures, a dark chapter in London's history that continues to hold us in its grip. Who is he? A doctor, an artist, a royal, or just a forgotten soul swallowed by the city's shadows? The truth, it seems, was buried with him, leaving only a name and a legend that will likely never die. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments which suspect you think is the most plausible. See you next time.